The human right issue that I have chosen is Indigenous residential schools in Canada. Residential schools were a systematic, government-sponsored attempt to destroy Aboriginal cultures and languages, and to assimilate Aboriginal peoples so that they no longer existed as distinct peoples. These government-funded, church-run institutions operated in Canada for over a century, forcibly removing Indigenous children from their families and assimilating them into European Canadian culture. This system caused profound harm to Indigenous children, families, and communities, stripping them of their culture, language, and identity, and violating their human rights. School held half boys and half girls, and they were segregated. If someone was caught waving to his or her sister or brother, there would be a punishment for it. Thousands of students suffered physical and sexual abuse at school and experienced loneliness and a longing to be reunited with their families. Not only did the schools deprive children of love and respect, but they also eroded the cultures, languages, and knowledge systems of First Nations Inuit and Metis peoples through forced assimilation. The effects of these harms continue to this day, with many survivors still finding it difficult to talk about their trauma at residential schools. TRJs deemed the legacy of residential schools a form of cultural genocide. In 1996, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples drew attention to these harms, and more survivors and their descendants began to tell their stories and demand action. Through the courage of the survivors, legal settlements were eventually reached with the government, the church, and others. 3 settlements included public apology, financial compensation, Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Today, many Indigenous children still experience intergenerational trauma from residential schools, which impacts their education and well-being. The forced separation of Indigenous families led to the breakdown of traditional parenting practices and cultural disconnection, and their communities continue to struggle with the effects of colonization, including systemic discrimination and health disparities. As future educators, we must understand the history and trauma of residential schools to support Indigenous children and families in a respectful and informed way. Understanding this history enables me to promote reconciliation, anti-bias education, and inclusive practices in my future work with children. Small actions, but really worth to do.